Welcome back to the Marketing as Missions podcast. My name is Jeff, and this is
Mandy.
And we're here today to talk about something that is very difficult for us, but at the same time, our world has grown a lot in understanding that this topic of conversation is a lot larger than we ever thought it was for everybody. Yeah. Not everybody, but a lot of people in our circles. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to let Mandy kind of take the wheels of this conversation, and I'll interject when I feel it's appropriate. But Mandy, what are we talking about today?
Today we're going to be talking about infertility and miscarriages. So I will put a trigger warning out here. If you are sensitive to these topics, you may just want to skip this podcast because we're going to be talking about both infertility and miscarriages and how it affects you. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our journey together as a couple, and then we'll talk about a little bit of some of the specifics of what we went through, and then we'll kind of talk about how we worked through it and have some encouragement for people who are going through infertility or miscarriages.
Yeah.
Growing up, I knew that I had some internal issues, and my doctor found out that I have a malformation of my uterus. And so that, along with some other things that were going on, were a really big question mark as to whether or not I would be able to have kids or be able to carry them, and or even really get pregnant. They weren't sure about that. I knew going into any relationship that I was going to have to talk about that to the person that I was dating, especially if we were going to think about getting married. I remember one night we were dating. It was kind of early in our dating relationship, but not super early.
Yeah, we weren't like in the, I don't know if I still like her or not stage, but we definitely weren't in the, ooh, I'm looking up rings on Google stage either.
We're definitely established as a dating couple,
yep.
But we weren't at the point of deciding on whether we wanted to get married or not.
We were still figuring out how good of friends we could be, and what our interests and disinterests were, what we like to do together, things like that.
And Jeff and I have always, we found just talking in a car it's when we have the best conversations, really.
That is our safe place.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like we should do our podcast in the car because I feel like our conversations are so good.
Epic.
So you get not as epic conversations in our fluffy chairs.
Although fluffy chairs in a living room that's it's pretty nice too. I don't mind this.
Oh, yeah. So we were in Jeff's car in the Walmart parking lot, I think.
Some really...
Or Target.
Real bougie establishment, yeah.
Yeah, we're in the parking lot, and I turned to Jeff and basically just told him, look, this is what's wrong with me, and the doctors don't know if I'll be able to get pregnant, if I'll be able to carry a pregnancy, or any of that. So I don't know if I'll be able to have kids. I was so scared to have that conversation. But I knew I had to have it because I needed to be upfront and honest with him about what I knew, that if we wanted to make this work, if we wanted to marry each other, that he was going to need to know that now.
Yeah, and I clearly remember that conversation. We had a really, just enjoyable date night. It was at Walmart or Target or whatever. I think we got, McDonald's. It wasn't like a Texas Roadhouse date night, for sure. My Dunkin' salary wasn't quite there yet. But we had really an enjoyable night. We were just kind of talking, and all of a sudden you just and you got real pasty white, and I was like, oh no, is she okay? What did the restaurant feed her? Maybe I should have taken her out to Texas Roadhouse. And I could tell she was scared. She was super nervous. And she just came out with everything. And I respected her so much for that. I was super proud of her in that moment, because in both of our lives, one of the things that we connected on pretty early on is that we were big people pleasers, but we also cared a lot about what other people thought, which fueled our people pleasing tendencies.
No.
But we also like to talk about it a lot, though, and we were very open and honest about things that bothered us in our life. I just remember that conversation and going, wow, I'm really proud of her for opening that up. I have a congenital heart defect. And so at that time in my life, I'm starting to date somebody, think a little bit more seriously about longer term relationship and marriage and all of the emotions, thought processes you have to go through when you are in a relationship like that. And I'm going, do I want to have kids? I know that my heart defect is hereditary. It runs in the family. It can happen to any one of my kids, grandkids, or what have you. And so I had in the back of my mind this very real possibility of, I don't know where I'm at on this. And so for her to open up and be the open book that she was on that really laid the foundation, honestly, through a lot of the hurt that we ended up experiencing later, because I still respected you, I still trusted you, I still knew that you were going to be open and honest with me, even when you didn't want to be. Because that's not a conversation you wanted to have with me that early on in our relationship. You were just starting to like me. And if I came back and for whatever reason didn't like what you had to say, you knew that there might be consequences with that.
Yeah.
You admitted that to me, and I was just so stinking proud of you in that moment. But also I don't show my tender heart a lot, sorry. But also was very tender-hearted towards how she was saying it, what she was saying, and wanted to make sure that I knew I was truly listening in that moment.
Yeah. So from there, we obviously got married.
Yep.
And it was over a year by the time that we decided we wanted to start having kids, or at least trying.
Mm-hmm.
We got pregnant like the first month that we tried.
Yep.
And I was so excited. I was shaking.
Over the moon, and this is not quite when Instagram and like stories and surprising your partner was quite at its peak, but it definitely had a lot of momentum where people were pulling pregnancy pranks and things like that. And so we would be sharing those kind of different stories back and forth to each other as a joke. And like you had all these different ideas of what you wanted to do, and I remember you showing me, and I went, oh, this is what it feels like. And it wasn't that I was upset, it wasn't that I was overly thrilled. I think I was just so full of emotion, I didn't know, I shut down. I just went, oh.
And
my whole life changed in that moment.
Yeah, it was, I was shocked. We had to go get blood work done.
Yep.
And our doctor was actually our landlord at the time.
Really cool setup, by the way.
Which we loved. And so we went and got blood work done. And then it was probably a couple days after we found out that we were pregnant, I had started bleeding, and our landlord came home. I was in the house getting ready. I think we were about to head to the hospital or something. And he came home, and he turned to Jeff, and he's like, oh, the blood work came back. Her numbers went up. Like, congratulations. I'm so happy for you. And Jeff's like, she started bleeding. And he's like, oh, no, like, go to the ER. It was very traumatic for me.
Well, and I had no clue what to think, because I had that conversation with him, and I still remember it clear as day. Today, it's like, wow, exciting news, and like, when you don't know, you don't know. And it was like, yeah, tables have turned. Different reality right now. And so you just don't know what to do in
Yeah.
those moments.
I remember after we left the ER, we went to McDonald's
Mm-hmm.
because we were hungry and it was late at night, so it was like one of the only places open.
Yep.
And I just broke down in the car and I was like, I'm a failure.
Mm.
Like I couldn't hold on to the baby, and like that was I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so hurt.
Yeah.
And I remember people kept telling us, like, well, at least you got pregnant. At least you know you can get pregnant. And I was thinking, yes, but I'm not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That hurt, and in ways that I probably can't even describe.
No.
Um,
We understood the heart of what they were trying to say.
right.
And we hadn't lived that life. We didn't walk in those shoes either, battling just true infertility.
Mm-hmm.
And but now we were on this side of our reality, and it was just as painful.
Right. And so, right or wrong, our doctor sent us to an OB, and they suggested that we go on a fertility drug. And so we went straight from, I think we probably waited a month
Mm-hmm.
or two before we started trying again. But we went from that straight to going on a fertility drug. Well, actually, no. It was because my period never regulated after the miscarriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they put us on a fertility drug. And we were on that for 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And did not work.
Nope.
Did not work for us at all. And I think during that time, it took a toll on both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because, our intimate time had to be scheduled and regulated, and I was still kind of getting over the hurt.
Yeah, you were grieving
and scared about what would happen if we did get pregnant again, but I wanted it. Mm-hmm. And so we finally just decided to stop and just kind of go from there because, it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And the next month, we got pregnant again. And within a week of finding out, I had another miscarriage. That was right before we moved down.
Mm-hmm. We were in the interview process.
We moved down at the end of October. The beginning of December, we found out that we were pregnant. And this one, we had been pregnant longer
mm-hmm.
than we had ever been, at least finding out wise.
Yeah.
Like a couple days after our Christmas meal with the staff,
mm-hmm.
and we had our third miscarriage. And at that point, I was...
You were done.
Yeah. I look back at pictures from that Christmas, and you can just see sadness in my eyes. Mm-hmm. Like, I was smiling, but I was not okay.
No.
And that was, my friends ended up having a baby. I remember my mom and my sister, like, talking about it, and, like, did you see this? Oh, their baby's so cute, or whatever. And I literally had to tell them, please stop, because I can't handle it.
Yeah.
And I can't talk about it right now.
And it hits you at all three of them. Hit you at such a deeper level than almost anything else in your life. I had never... I mean, you don't obviously know somebody perfectly a year and a half, 2-3 years into marriage, but you've got to know them at a reasonable level to go ahead and make that commitment.
Yeah.
And I had never seen you be rocked like that before. You'd been taken aback or shocked at stuff, but never had I seen you been rocked to your core and then so frequently over and over again without having a healing process, because there really isn't one.
Yeah.
There's healing that goes with time in some ways, but when you're in the heat of the moment, don't stop saying that. Like, that was not helpful at all for me or for her. And it was just so difficult to navigate as a husband, because you're sad too. Like I said, your whole life changes when you find out again. And then you instantly go, at least I did, I went into like protect mode, where I was like, what do I do if we lose this one? Because obviously you're sad for the loss of life, but I also have a deep desire and need to protect my wife, to comfort her, to help her through. But I legitimately can't fix anything. I am stuck in the mud with her. But nothing I say, nothing I do can help. And so my anxiety, my stress level would always increase for very different reasons. And it wasn't because I didn't want the kid or I didn't know how it was going to work. It was more of like I just went into protect, like fight or flight mode the whole time. And I know that that wasn't an amazing environment that I created. But when you're young and dumb and you've been through a lot of hurt, you don't know any better until you kind of live through it and work through it and seek God all the time.
Yeah. I think the best thing that we did during that time was we confided in a few people. I mean, we had mentioned that we had miscarriages, but at least the first one we put it on Facebook because we had told a couple people at that point. The other two, we didn't say anything except for to a few people. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly, they were people that had also gone through losses and were able to just be a listening ear and to be a comforting hug, and knowing that they were praying for us in those times. That was one of the best things. And after our it was our third miscarriage, I had received a care package that had a devotional book in it that helped me process through my grief. I think a lot of times my logical brain would be like, yes, you were pregnant, but you only knew you were pregnant for a week, or you didn't carry the baby that long, or maybe it was just a fluke and your numbers were up, but you actually weren't pregnant. But that's not true. The truth is I was pregnant, and even though I was only pregnant for a short amount of time, it was still a life. It still mattered. And so even though my brain wanted to say that my grief didn't matter, my heart was saying, no, it does. It does matter. And even to God, it matters. And so that was, that devotional book really helped me get through a lot of those thoughts and feelings. And
well, it was game changing in our marriage too, because our marriage was taking a toll by this point. It wasn't in a bad place, but you can't go through that and be okay individually and then together. And that devotional book was game changing for us because it allowed you to think through and process, but then also have a conversation with me about what was going on in your mind, how you were processing it. And it allowed you to explain things to me that was going on deep inside your heart, so that I could actually truly listen and take part in the conversation without feeling like I had to come to her rescue and swoop her up and take her up to the castle and take care of her, and all of those great, imagination things you see. But
It
it
helped
allowed us
you
to
know
bond.
that God was working on my heart.
Yeah,
And even
absolutely.
though you couldn't fix me, God was working on me. And that kind of helped you not feel like you had to be Mr. Fix It.
Yeah.
And that was, that was really.
That was huge. Because there are sometimes, and Mandy can attest to this, I'll admit it, I can either be too overbearing in my caring, or I don't care enough. Like, I don't really have an in between.
Yeah.
And it's either I get up, rub some dirt in it, and move on, or how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? If you don't let me help, I'm going to make your life miserable. How can I help? How can I help? And honestly, neither one of those are very helpful. And so I was really struggling in my own heart, in my own walk with the Lord, dealing with my own grief, and yet not being able to help at all. Even though I thought my heart was in the right place, my heart and my brain were not connecting well at all with her.
So after our third miscarriage, we were sent to a reproductive endocrinologist. And basically, when you're sent there, they're saying you have fertility issues.
Mm-hmm.
Like, accepting that fact was, I think, hard for both of us in the sense of, like, but we're getting pregnant. So, like, I feel like it's not a fertility issue, but it kind of was. I was glad to go somewhere where we were going to find out some answers, potentially, but it was also hard accepting the fact that, I was the problem.
Well, and it was hard. It was hard because we kept getting pregnant, and it's difficult because you're thinking through the logic of it, and you're going, well, the first part happened, so probably not. But there were so many unanswereds that we didn't know. And so, like Mandy said, to find the answers out, or at least get a clue to the answers, was just going to be so much for our hearts and our heads. And you're not going to find out all the answers.
No.
And we weren't looking for why.
Well, and spoiler alert, we still didn't find out answers, but we'll get to that.
Correct. And we weren't even really looking out for why. We were just like, what?
Yeah. What's going on?
Obviously, we knew the how.
What's the problem?
But, yeah.
So, we go to this appointment for the reproductive endocrinologist, and we get there, and they're going through the whole questions, and I say, well, I'm 2 weeks late, but that happens all the time because I'm not, it's not regular, and, all these things because of all the fun things that we've gone through. And they're like, well, in your panel of blood work, we'll do a pregnancy test too, and, we'll just go from there. And it's like, sounds good. You're probably not going to find anything.
And at this point, we're like, okay, but just don't tell us. Like, we came out, the third one was the hardest. Like Mandy said, we'd found out, we kept it really quiet for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
We actually had some hope. We were, to the point where it's like, maybe.
Almost to the first appointment.
Maybe. And then it's gone.
Yeah.
And so we're like, at this point, just don't tell us.
And this appointment was in January.
Yeah.
Right after that. As soon as that appointment was over, my sister and I were driving up to Ohio to visit my grandma. Yeah. And because Dana was going to be going to Romania on a mission trip, she wanted to see my grandma before she left. And so, we set out on a 6-hour drive.
Just the sisters.
So, the next day, Jeff is at work at the church, and I get a phone call from the doctor's office saying, you're pregnant, and your numbers are 3,000 something. My numbers had never been that high before. They'd been 100s, or, maybe 500, I think, at one point. never that high. And I was like, what? And they're like, oh, by the way, you have very low progesterone and you need to start taking some, like, right away. And I was like, but I'm in Ohio and my pharmacy is in North Carolina. And they're like, as soon as you get home, start your progesterone. Because I think I was only there for like one more night or something like that. And so I was just in shock. And I tried to call Jeff, and he was in staff meeting. And he's like, just call me later. And I was like, as soon as you are done, call me. Like, this is important.
I thought her grandma died.
No, my grandma's still living. And so that was crazy. And then I had to try to keep it a secret from everyone because we were visiting my family, like my grandma, and then the rest of our family came down for dinner that night, and so it was all of my aunts and uncles, and I'm not good at keeping secrets. So I did tell my mom and my Aunt Joy and my sister, but everyone else I did not tell, so sorry about that, but yeah, that was crazy. Well, spoiler alert, that was Logan. We were pregnant with Logan. And we went to the reproductive endocrinologist until we were 10 weeks along. And they did an ultrasound at 6 weeks and 8 weeks and 10 weeks. And when we did the 6-week ultrasound, they, put the thing in and I still remember they just kind of flipped the switch for the sound. They didn't really tell us. And all of a sudden you just hear the heartbeat. I bawled. And when I mean bawled, I'm like tears streaming down my face.
Straight up ugly cry.
Just like, it's like.
Well, okay, she did do that. She probably doesn't remember that she almost broke my hand in the process. Because she was holding my hand, and then all of a sudden, like, the heartbeat kicks on. And I went from, oh, wow, that's cool, to, ow! like, it's one of those things, like, in the moment, you want to have this, special moment. This is amazing. Thank you, Lord. And the only thing I can think of is, ow! So, like, the story of our lives together is everything is mixed with an ounce of humor, and that was my moment of this is amazing, ouch.
Well, and you didn't get that when I went into labor, so I guess that was
true. That's a whole other podcast, is Logan's story, but anyway. But no, Mandy shared that we saw or had an ultrasound 3 times before most normal pregnancies get one.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought it was incredibly fitting and incredibly healing that it was 3 ultrasounds.
Yeah.
And not that it makes up for anything or any of the losses, but it was as if God was saying, this one I've got you.
Yeah.
This one I've got you. This one I've got you.
Yeah.
And, I think the longest 2 weeks, or however long, I forget now the amount of time it was the time between the last ultrasound at the endocrinologist and the normal
so we
ultrasound.
Had a 12-week ultrasound at the regular.
Yep.
And then the longest time was between the 12-week and the 20-week.
That's right. Yep, that's what it was.
Because we had been used to going every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we just thought that was normal.
Well, no, we didn't.
I did. I was like, I don't
know. But I was so thankful to have the opportunity to be at the endocrinologist for that pregnancy, because I was able to be reassured that it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay. And I think if we hadn't had that experience, we probably would have been very anxious.
It would have gone a bunch of different directions that would not have been good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's basically our fertility journey.
Check back in 20 years for our parenting journey.
In process right now.
And we understand not everybody has the same ending that we do.
Yeah.
And we struggled with different things than a lot of others struggle with. But it is one of those things that we wanted to get out there as a couple, because we know that hurt is real. I mean, even the amount of people we've been able to minister to in our own local church.
Mm-hmm. Well, the numbers show 1 in 4 women suffer from miscarriages. 1 in 4. That is not that is not a small number of people. And there's not a lot of talk about miscarriages or working through miscarriages, especially in the church. I think a lot of people are starting to open up about them, and especially with social media and being able to connect through social media, a lot of people are starting to work through a lot of those. But for the longest time, especially when I was going through them, it was almost like taboo to talk about it. That
we were right on the edge of it not being there, but because we were so new to the area that we didn't have very many established relationships where we felt like we had the proper people in that time, in that moment to talk to.
And it's interesting now because we've been in Winston-Salem for almost 7 years, and there's still people that hear our story and say, "Oh, I didn't know that you guys had miscarriages." And it's not because we don't talk about it. I think it's more so just that probably haven't been in the conversations when we have.
Yeah. Or like I said, they came in with conversation after we've already had Logan and Kinley.
Yeah.
That they know Jeff, Mandy, Logan, Kinley.
Yeah, and they didn't know about the struggles that we had before that. And, a lot of our issues happen in Pennsylvania and not in Winston-Salem. So, it's just, it's hard to go through that. And it's hard to talk about it because even with other people, you're being so vulnerable about your desires and feeling like you're a failure or feeling like your body is failing you because you have no control over it. And it's really hard to work through those emotions. But we wanted to do this podcast to share not only our hurts and our struggles, but that, God is faithful. And He will walk with you through all of your struggles, whether it's fertility related or something else. During those times, reading that devotional book and getting myself into scripture is honestly, as you said, it made the biggest difference in our marriage. It made the biggest difference in my attitude and in how I viewed myself and how I viewed God. And it helped me to seek comfort from Him instead of seeking comfort through other means or trying to find something to fill that hole. And I feel like a lot of times in those situations is when people try to fill it with something that's not good. That tends to be where addiction comes in to anything, really.
Or our unfaithfulness to God or our partner and things like that. No, God's grace and mercy was just so overflowing in our lives at that time. And we had such a perfect community the first time. where it was like, okay, they loved us through it. Some of the other ladies in the group had been there. God knew what we needed in the right time. And again, God does not work the same way in your life as He does ours. But at the same time, Mandy never lost hope. Mandy never lost faith. Not in her pregnancy journey, because there were times that wavered. She never lost faith in God. That God was God and she was not.
We said that a lot.
You'll hear that as one of our life phrases a lot. But God is God and we aren't. And the more quickly we accept that for the capital T truth that it is, the quicker we can truly begin healing. And healing, when I say that, do not think healing is just getting over it.
No.
There's no getting over this. I still have the Facebook post that I wrote out on the notes in my phone from our first one to this day.
Yeah.
There's no getting over it, but the healing process is understanding that God is God and you aren't, but He's got your good for His glory in mind every day of your life. Doesn't feel like it sometimes. Doesn't look like it sometimes. But don't ever lose faith in that. And I'm proud of you for not doing that, even though your faith in other things wavered or your desire to want to have kids kind of ebbed and flowed there for a little bit. And we wanted to start a family. That was something we both wanted. We didn't know we wanted until it actually, we had the first pregnancy test and we're like, oh snap, this is real. Everybody's like, oh, your life changes when you have kids. Mine changed the first time she put a pregnancy test in front of me and it was positive. Instantly, I switched. By the time Logan was born, I was still the dumb male dad in the hospital going, I don't know what to do with this. But I was I'd already kind of gone into that protector, that father mode because of the pregnancy that we experienced almost at that point 2.5, 3 years before that. Two.
Well,
2-ish.
By the time he was born, it was almost 3.
Yep. There's no encouragement sometimes to find in other people's stories other than you're not alone. Yeah. And dads, you are not alone. Listen, you obviously have a part in all of this. And you are not the failure. You are not the failure. God is not failing. You are not failing. Your wife is not failing. Stay strong in your faith in God. It might not change anything, but your life will be so much better off for it.
I know that was a deeper, harder one to go through.
We told you we had big, huge topics.
But thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah.
And if you've ever gone through infertility or miscarriage, know that we are here for you. And if you need some support or some encouragement, leave a comment down below or feel free to message one of us. And we would love to pray for you and give you some encouragement from God's Word.
And if you want the resource for Mandy's devotional, we'll have that linked in the show notes below as well. There's not as many as we would like out there, but there are more than were out there when we went through it. But we'll just share the one that meant a lot to us. And hope you guys have a great one. See you next time.
Bye.